This is Bekkr. Let's continue the tutorial series by taking a look at some slightly more interesting modulation options. First, right now we are looking at, so let me simplify this just to make it a little easier to follow. Right now we are using a low pass gate for everything. And while I absolutely love a low pass gate, sometimes that is not what we're actually looking for. We want the shape of an actual envelope. So let's look at how we change this. And the way we would use a regular envelope is we first insert an amplifier, VCA, voltage controlled amplifier. And then we insert an envelope. And the way envelopes work here, it's just doing a simple attack decay envelope, so they create a modulation lane. So now every time a note comes in, you can see the envelope is running, and through that, it is powering its own little modulation lane. So let's tie the gain of this VCA to that, and then we can go ahead and remove our low pass gate. And now we're listening to the sound running through the VCA with the envelope controlling it. So let's change the shape of this a little bit. Maybe a slightly shorter. Also change the curve of these. Let's make it like a real plucky sound. Or we could make it something that has much longer decay. Like a slow down. So this is giving you a lot more options in how to control the shape of your sounds. These. And then let's look at other ways to use modulation that are slightly more advanced than we've done before. And so we have looked at regular LFOs as modulation sources, right? So you would have something that is like a sine, you could have different shapes, we have sample and hold versions and stuff like that. You can tie those to any parameters you want. It's very useful. We also looked at the modulation sequencer, which lets you change things along with the sequence you're playing. But we also have some other interesting options. One is an envelope follow. So actually, I would want that all the way out here. So now this is gonna look at the incoming sound, and it's gonna create a modulation lane that follows that. And now for most of the things we've done, we've created a modulation source, and then later in the chain, we've used that. But there's actually no order or direction in these. So the modulation lanes are available at all spaces in the sequence. So why don't we use this new modulation lane to control the vowel sound of this format oscillator. Skip these to listen. And here we control how fast it's willing to rise. I see that it's not actually giving us a lot of range there. So let's try to tie that to something else that we can more easily hear. About a distortion unit. And then we'll tie maybe the drive. And that was intense. Let me throw the mix down a little bit here. There we go. The whole system is feeding through a brick wall limiter so you don't throw off your audio card, but things can get pretty wild, especially with things like this that create gain. All right, let's try again. It's interesting. Right. Having some fun little squibbles there when the format was actually being changed by that. But let's do something else for the format change here. Let's throw in a different type of modulation. Let's look at what do we call that? Tides. The idea in tides here is you get 4 modulation lanes. They all follow each other as if they were little buoys floating on a wave. So let's take a look first here. All right, once again, let's try changing our vowels. And we can change the speed of it. We want it a little slower. Variability is how much is each wave similar to each other and how much is one rolling much higher than others. We change the shape a little bit to have like a break at the end. And again, these are all options that could be useful to you depending on what you're trying to modulate. So this is giving you a lot more idea of what we use modulation to and some of the options for modulation. I just want to show you one last thing here, which is you can use modulation to modulate things, which in itself can be interesting to create really varied and complex modulation shapes, especially if you're modulating something not over seconds, but over like minutes or hours. But the other interesting thing we can do is we can do modulation math. So here is a modulation element where you pick 2 sources. Let's take 2 here, and then you pick an operation. So let's play again. So right now add is taking the 2 modulation elements and adding together. Could do a different multiply. Take the minimum, take the maximum, sample and hold between them. And you'll discover as you go through all of these that are a lot more options. There are modulation delays. There are ways to invert it. There are lots of other interesting ways to change them. To me, this is, of course, the sequencing is a big part of generated music, but the real fun stuff here comes from really having a ton of interesting modulation. To me, this is always what made some of the electron machines, especially some of the early, like the mono machine and machine drum, had an immense number of modulation options and number of modulators that you could run at the same time. And that's what really made those interesting. And so I hope this is something that you end up experimenting with in Bekkr and that you find it as a really interesting way to craft a sound that is constantly changing below you and maybe sometimes unpredictable to yourself. Thanks for watching. And let me know if you start making something with Bekkr. Would love to hear and see what other people get up to.